Have you ever noticed that no matter how hard you work, your energy always seems to dip in the afternoon? You push yourself to get ahead, to hustle. You drink that third cup of coffee, staring at the screen, waiting for a spark that never comes. You've been told that this is the price of success. You've been told that fatigue is just a sign that you're outworking the competition. But somehow, you're always exhausted. Not just physically, but deep in your bones, a mental weight that no amount of caffeine can lift. Most people believe that waking up at 4 a.m., forcing yourself out of bed to get a head start while the world sleeps, is the ultimate secret to success. We lionize the early risers. We read the headlines about CEOs who work out at dawn and answer emails before the sun is up. But what if I told you that for the vast majority of people, this is the very thing that's sabotaging your brain? What if your discipline is actually a slow-motion destruction of your cognitive potential? We've all been told that the early risers are the successful ones. But in reality, waking up before dawn and pushing yourself without proper rest could actually shrink your brain's gray matter and guarantee eventual burnout. This isn't a theory, it's neurobiology. Stanford neuroscientists have discovered something crucial: cutting short your REM sleep, the final, most restorative phase of your sleep cycle. It's like starting your day with a biological hangover. You wake up foggy, unable to focus, but it's worse than just feeling tired. Your brain, at this point, is in a state of profound confusion. Think about the last time you woke up to an alarm in the middle of a dream, the disorientation you felt. That's your brain being ripped out of the most important maintenance work. It performs REM sleep is the period when your brain processes emotions, consolidates complex memories, and literally cleanses itself of metabolic waste. When you cut that short to join the 5 a.m. club, you are essentially leaving your brain's trash on the floor and trying to run a marathon through the clutter. The deepest parts of your sleep cycle are when your brain does its most important work. It's not a passive state. It's an active, high-energy process of recalibration. Without this, your cognitive performance doesn't just dip, it starts to deteriorate. Your emotional stability is compromised. You become more reactive, more anxious, and less capable of the very high-level strategy you think you're waking up early to achieve. This isn't just about feeling tired. This is about the architecture of your mind. Sleep deprivation drastically reduces blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO of your brain. It handles decision-making, long-term planning, and impulse control. When you starve this area of rest, your ability to think rationally plummets. You're not working harder. You're just making harder work for your future self. Meanwhile, while your CEO is offline, your amygdala, the primitive emotional center of the brain, takes over the controls. Instead of making logical, strategic decisions, you start reacting. You're impulsive. You're irritable. You're in survival mode. And in survival mode, you cannot innovate. You can only endure. What if I told you that this entire system of hustling early is actually the opposite of what you need to reach the top? What if the path to true peak performance isn't found in the darkness of 4 a.m., but in the silence of surrender?
understand why your brain resists those early mornings, we have to look inside, deep beneath the skull, into a world that never truly sleeps, even when you are lost in the deepest oblivion. Most people think of sleep as a simple shutdown, like hitting the power button on a laptop. But that is a dangerous misunderstanding in reality. During sleep, your brain becomes the site of the most intensive sanitary processing imaginable. Scientists at the University of Rochester discovered what we now call the glymphatic system. Imagine a night shift of cleaners in a massive, complex office building. All day, your neurons were firing, building connections, transmitting impulses. And in the process of that work, they left behind trash, metabolic waste. One of the most dangerous byproducts is beta amyloid. This is the same protein that accumulates in the brains of those with Alzheimer's throughout the day. It builds up in the spaces between your cells. And there is only one way to wash it away. Only one. When you enter deep sleep, your brain cells, they literally shrink. They reduce in volume by nearly 60%. This creates space, a series of channels through which cerebrospinal fluid begins to circulate. It flushes the toxins, scrubs the neurons, and prepares the soil for tomorrow. Now, imagine setting your alarm for 4 or 5 a.m. You are cutting this process off in the middle of the cycle. You are leaving a toxic film on your synapses. You are heading into the world with a dirty brain, and no amount of caffeine can replace this biological cleansing. But it's not just about cleanliness. It's about energy in its most literal form. Glucose is the fuel of your intellect. fMRI scans show that in a person deprived of even just a couple of hours of sleep, glucose metabolism in the prefrontal cortex drops catastrophically. Your logical center is quite literally starving. It enters a state of low power mode. Meanwhile, your amygdala, the center for fear and aggression, receives priority feeding. Why? Because the brain perceives sleep deprivation as a threat signal. It's as if you are in the woods, fleeing a predator. Your brain decides you don't need a 5-year strategic plan. You only need to survive the next 5 minutes. You become a slave to your impulses. You snap at your colleagues. You reach for quick, sugary fuel. You procrastinate because the brain has no energy left for an act of will. And the ultimate irony is that you do this in the name of productivity. You are stealing 20% of your cognitive capacity just to gain 1 extra hour of work at 5 a.m. It is a deal where you lose every single day. Research shows that being awake for 17 to 19 hours affects your cognitive performance as severely as having a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. You are literally trying to build your career or your business in a state of mild intoxication. Your reactions are sluggish, your creative thinking is paralyzed, and your empathy is non-existent. We live in a society that prides itself on exhaustion. But exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It is a biological debt that is always collected with interest. And if you don't pay that debt on time, your brain will start taking it anyway. Through depression, through cognitive decline, through the slow loss of meaning. Think about that every morning. When you forcibly rip yourself from sleep, you are committing a microaggression against your own biology. You are rigging your nervous system for failure before you've even poured your first cup of coffee.
This block shifts the focus from general biology to individual identity. It challenges the idea that being a morning person is a moral virtue, reframing it as a genetic lottery. Block 3. The Chronotype Code. Your genetic internal clock. We live in a culture that treats the alarm clock as a test of character. If you can't jump out of bed at 5 a.m. with a smile on your face, the world tells you that you are lazy, that you lack discipline, that you simply don't want success enough. But what if I told you that your preferred wake-up time is written into your DNA before you were even born? What if your struggle with mornings isn't a flaw in your willpower, but a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering? In the world of chronobiology, we call this your chronotype. It is your internal timing system, governed by a small cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is your master clock, and for about 40% of the population, this clock is not set to the standard business day. Geneticists have identified specific genes like the PER3 gene that determine whether you are a morning lark, a night owl, or somewhere in between. This isn't a habit you picked up in college. It is a biological imperative, expecting a natural night owl to be productive at 6 a.m. is like asking a fish to climb a tree. It's not a matter of effort. It's a matter of anatomy. Think about our ancestors thousands of years ago, living in small tribes. If everyone in the tribe slept at the exact same time, the group would be vulnerable to predators or rival tribes for 8 hours every night. Evolution solved this through chronodiversity by having some people who stayed up late, the owls, and some who woke up early, the larks. The tribe's total vulnerability window was reduced from 8 hours to maybe 4. We survived as a species because we didn't all sleep at the same time. The night owl wasn't a slacker. They were the sentinel. They were the guardian of the midnight hours. Yet, in our modern world, we have created a chronotype apartheid. We have built an entire global economy around the biological rhythm of the morning lark. Schools, offices, and stock markets all open when the owl's brain is still in its deepest state of rest. This creates a phenomenon known as social jet lag. Social jet lag is what happens when your biological clock and your social clock are completely out of sync. It feels like living in a permanent state of travel. You are physically in one time zone, but your brain is performing in another. Millions of people are living their entire lives in this state of chronic misalignment. They aren't depressed. They are just desynchronized. They aren't failing. They're just being forced to play a game where the rules are rigged against their biology. When you force a night owl to function in a lark's world, you aren't just making them grumpy. You are triggering a systemic stress response. Cortisol levels spike at the wrong times. The heart works harder. The immune system weakens. By the time the owl finally reaches their peak cognitive window, usually in the late afternoon or evening, the world tells them it's time to go home and relax. Their greatest ideas come to them when the rest of the world is watching Netflix. And because they can't share those ideas in a 9 a.m. meeting, their brilliance is often ignored. True self-mastery begins with chronotype surrender.
It begins with stopping the war against your own cells. It begins with the realization that the 5 a.m. club is just one way to live. And for millions of us, it is the wrong way. Success doesn't have a time zone, innovation doesn't have a curfew. The most productive version of you isn't the one that wakes up earliest. It's the one that wakes up when their brain is actually ready to think. As we move forward, I want you to ask yourself, are you truly tired? Or are you just living in someone else's rhythm? In the next part, we will discuss the 7-day reset, the protocol that allows you to find your true north and finally meet the version of yourself that has been hiding behind an alarm clock for years.
We have diagnosed the problem. We have looked into the biology of your brain and the history of your ancestors. Now, we enter the laboratory of your own life. This is the Chronotype Surrender Protocol. It is not a hack. It is not a 10-step morning routine. It is a 7-day window of complete biological honesty. For 1 week, we are going to remove the artificial constraints you have placed on your consciousness and see what remains. The rule is simple, yet for many, it is the most terrifying thing they can imagine. Turn off the alarm. For the next 7 days, you will not dictate when your day begins. You will let your body, your DNA, and your neurochemistry make that decision for you. This is the act of surrendering. You are yielding the steering wheel to the millions of years of evolution that designed your internal clock. Shutter stop. Days 1 through 3, the Great Debt Collection. In the first 72 hours, you are not finding your rhythm. You are paying a debt. Most of you are living in a state of sleep debt so profound that your brain has forgotten what it feels like to be truly awake. When you turn off that alarm, do not be surprised if you sleep for 10, 11, or even 12 hours. Do not judge yourself. Do not call it lazy. Your glymphatic system is finally getting the time it needs to perform a deep clean that has been delayed for years. You are flushing out the accumulation of months of hustling. During these first 3 days, your only job is to listen. If you wake up at noon, wake up at noon. If you wake up at 5 a.m. naturally, embrace it. But do not force it. Days 4 and 5, the chemical stabilization. By the 4th day, the initial exhaustion begins to lift. This is where the magic happens. Your adenosine levels, the chemical that builds up in your brain to create sleep pressure, finally reach a baseline. You will start to notice a shift in your internal temperature and your light sensitivity. Your brain's master clock, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is beginning to resynchronize with the Earth's light-dark cycle without the interference of a vibrating phone or a blaring siren. Notice when you naturally feel the urge to stop working. Notice when your eyes begin to heavy. Notice when that morning fog, that sleep inertia, begins to dissipate on its own without a double espresso. You are witnessing the birth of your true peak performance window. Days 6 and 7, the discovery of the peak. By the end of the week, the debt is paid.
The noise has settled. Now, you observe the pattern. Are you waking up at 8:30 a.m. with a sense of clarity you haven't felt since childhood? Are you finding that your best ideas arrive at 11 p.m. when the world told you that you should be asleep? This is your biological gold mine. This protocol isn't about staying in bed forever. It's about identifying the exact moment your prefrontal cortex comes online. When you find this window, you don't need to work 16 hours a day. 4 hours of work performed within your natural chronotype is more effective than 12 hours of work performed against it. You aren't losing time. You are gaining intensity. The Surrender Protocol is a reset of the spirit as much as the body. It is a declaration that you are no longer a cog in a 9-to-5 machine that wasn't built for you. You are an individual with a specific genetic cadence. In the next part, we will discuss how to take this discovery and integrate it into a world that still demands you show up on time. We will discuss the mastery of flow, the state where work ceases to be an effort and becomes an expression of your biology. Take a breath. The alarm is off, the world can wait. Your brain is finally coming home.
You have completed the reset. You have looked into the mirror of your own biology and seen the truth. But now comes the question that stops most people in their tracks. How do I live this way in a world that won't stop for me? Integration isn't about quitting your job or moving to a cave. It is about biological leverage. It's about understanding that an hour of work at the peak of your neurochemical tide is worth 5 hours of work when you are drowning in sleep debt. Think about your prefrontal cortex again. This is the seat of your genius. When you align your hardest tasks with your natural wakefulness window, you aren't just working. You are entering a state of flow. In flow, the brain's neurochemistry shifts. You are flooded with a precise cocktail of norepinephrine, dopamine, and anandamide. This mixture shuts down the inner critic and accelerates information processing. But here is the catch. Flow is biologically expensive. You cannot enter flow if your brain is still busy trying to clear out yesterday's metabolic waste. True productivity isn't about how many hours you spend at your desk. It's about how many minutes you spend in flow. When you are rested and aligned with your chronotype, another powerful system comes online, your reticular activating system, or the RAS. The RAS is the gatekeeper of your consciousness. It filters the millions of bits of data surrounding you and decides what is important enough to reach your conscious mind. When you are exhausted, your RAS is set to survival mode. It only looks for threats, for quick hits of dopamine, and for the easiest path to the end of the day. You miss the subtle opportunities. You miss the viral hook, the strategic pivot, the creative breakthrough. But when you are operating from a place of biological surrender, when your brain is clean and your rhythm is synced, your RAS becomes a heat-seeking missile for success. It begins to highlight connections you never saw before. It sees the solution to a problem while you're making tea. It recognizes a pattern in the market that your competitors are too tired to notice. Success is not a result of seeing more. It's a result of seeing better.
and you cannot see better when your eyes are heavy with the weight of a 5 a.m. wake-up call you didn't need. Now, consider the default mode network, or the DMN. This is the part of your brain that is active when you are not focused on a specific task, when you are daydreaming or idling. Society calls this wasting time, but neurophysiology tells us a different story. The DMN is where your greatest creative leaps are born. It is where your brain connects A to Z in ways that logic never could. However, the DMN requires a surplus of energy to function at a high level. If you are constantly grinding, constantly on, and constantly sleep deprived, you are starving your DMN. You are killing your intuition. Strategic integration means protecting these windows. It means scheduling your deep work during your peak chronotype hours and allowing your DMN to wander when your energy naturally dips. You don't need more discipline. You need better timing. You don't need a more expensive planner. You need a more respected biology. By surrendering to your rhythm, you aren't doing less. You are doing more by being more. You are shifting from a worker to a strategist, from a hustler to a master. The transition is subtle, but the results are tectonic as you begin to work with your brain instead of against it. You will notice that the world seems to move slower while you move faster. In our final part, we will look at the long-term transformation, the philosophical shift from the hustle to the harmony. The moment you realize that your rest isn't a break from your work, it is your work.
We have traveled from the microscopic cleaning of your neurons to the ancient genetic code of your ancestors. We have dismantled the myth of the grind and replaced it with the flow. But as we reach the end of this journey, we must address the most important shift of all, the shift in your identity. For years, you may have defined your worth by your exhaustion. You wore your busyness like a suit of armor, believing that if you just pushed harder, stayed up later, and woke up earlier, you would eventually reach a state of peace. But peace is not a destination you arrive at through war, and you have been at war with your own biology for far too long. Success, in its truest form, is not about how much you can endure. It is about how much you can sustain. In a world that is obsessed with the hustle, being a person who is deeply rested, mentally clear, and biologically aligned is a revolutionary act. It is an act of sovereignty. You are no longer reacting to the demands of a frantic world. You are responding from the center of your own power. Think of your life as a mirror. If the glass is cracked and covered in the dust of fatigue, the reflection you see of the world will be distorted. You will see obstacles where there are opportunities. You will see enemies where there are allies. You will see a version of yourself that is small, tired, and desperate. But when you surrender to your rhythm, when you allow the mirror of your mind to be cleaned by the restorative power of sleep and the alignment of your chronotype, the reflection changes. The world becomes clearer. Your purpose becomes sharper. You begin to move through life with a quiet confidence, knowing that your greatest tool, your consciousness, is sharp, fueled, and ready. There is a deep fear in our culture, the fear fear of falling behind. We think that if we sleep while others work, we are losing ground. But look around you. Look at the 5 a.m. club. Look at the burnout, the anxiety, the shallow thinking, and the health crises that follow the hustle like a shadow. The person who works 12 hours in a fog will always be outperformed by the person who works 4 hours in a state of biological grace. Rest is not a luxury. Rest is a competitive advantage. In a world of tired, reactive people, the person who is truly awake is king. This is your invitation to step out of the trap. The 5 a.m. club is a prison with open doors. You can walk out whenever you choose. You can choose to be the person who values their gray matter more than a performative morning routine. You can choose to be the person who honors their genetic code more than a viral productivity hack. So, as this audio fades, I want you to make a pact with the person in the mirror. Not a pact to work harder, but a pact to listen better. To listen to the cues of your body, to respect the night owl or the morning lark that lives within you, to understand that your energy is a finite, sacred resource. The choice is yours. Will you continue to fight the very biology that created you, or will you surrender to it and unlock a level of success, clarity, and freedom that you've never experienced before? The alarm is off. The sun will rise when it's time. And for the first time in a long time, you are finally awake.